So welcome back to Surviving with Style on a Budget. So in this episode, we are going to create my sister-in-law's birthday cake. So she called me the other day and she said that she wanted a caramel sponge cake with a caramel buttercream. So that's what she got. I took the liberty of baking yesterday. And as I've shared in previous episodes, on the bottom of all of my cakes is going to be parchment paper because it pulls off the cake, leaves it an even base, and you don't have crumbs going everywhere. I have 3 layers we're going to put together. I've taken the liberty of making the buttercream. If you want the recipe to that, make sure to go back to one of my first episodes where I give the directions and recipe on how to make buttercream. This is an American buttercream. It's good for basically any type of a cake, holds up well for wedding cakes, birthday cakes, etc. So this I flavored with some vanilla extract, a little almond extract, and caramel extract. You can get the caramel extract online, and you may be able to find it at some of your local cake decorating supply shops. Fortunately for me, about an hour from here is a little town called New Albany, Indiana, and Cake Lady's Dream Shop that's been there as long as I can remember has everything you could want. And what we're gonna do is start with the base. So if you remember on some of the previous episodes, I always do a little bit of icing on the base of the cake round. And the reason for that is to keep the cake from sliding. You don't need a lot, just a little. And here we go. And remember what I said, look on top to judge that it looks pretty equal all the way around. A good way to do it is to hold your fingers together and just keep rolling it, and it'll move the cake until it's centered. Now that we have it centered, remember, this is a bread cutter. You can probably find these from woodworking artisans online, or you can go to any of the local festivals in the fall and probably find it. I found this at Chautauqua here in Madison, Indiana, that we had the last weekend of September. And the following weekend in Louisville, Kentucky is the St. James Art Festival. And you definitely will find something like this there. So again, where the cake looks like it is the lowest that it baked in the pan is where I want to start. And remember, let the cake table do the work. And I'm just going to go around cutting the first part of the edge. And now that I'm back to where I started, I'll go in deeper and I'll just keep turning this table. Let the table do the work. If you start to force it, it may not do well for you. Now, in some YouTube stations or on some YouTube stations, you'll probably see people that do this with knives and cut a beautifully, perfectly leveled cake. I'm not one of those people. This is not my expertise. This is a hobby for me. So I have to rely on science, basically, on leveling. Okay, so here we go. Now I'm going to do something that looks pretty strange, and that is I'm now going to pick this cake up and I'm going to turn it over. The reason I did that is this is sealed here. It doesn't really stick to the cake round as well as have an exposed cake. So I've cut it, I've turned it over, it's on that icing, and now we're just going to do simply what I showed you in some of the previous episodes. If this is your first episode, this is a small icing spatula. You don't want a lot of icing to go between these layers. And the reason for that is if you have a lot of filling or frosting or icing between the layers, they can shift and you can have an uneven cake. So I just want enough to just glue these cakes together, basically. So here's the other layers. Very level. I've already cut it off. I'm going to pull off the parchment paper. And remember, exposed open cake on top of the icing to glue it together. And then we're going to do the same thing. A little bit of icing. And there's no art to this, just maybe ice the cake like you're trying to glue something together. So we're going to do a nice even layer of this. And I can almost see through this icing to what's underneath. That's how thin I'm putting this. You can do it a little thicker. You're going to need to put dowels in the cake to really hold it in place. And then we're going to take this one. Now this one is a little uneven, very uneven. What you can do to compensate for it when it is slightly uneven around the edges is to put a little more icing toward the edge to fill in the gap. I really enjoy doing stuff like this. I'm in healthcare and it can be pretty stressful. At the end of the day, when you get home, you want to relax. This is one of the things that relaxes me. Because there's really no right or wrong to how I do this. It's however I like it. And if I don't like it, just eat it and start over. All right, so now I'm going to turn this down. And you can see that filled in a little bit of the gaps there. And you want to turn it all the way around. And what I'm going to do now is get a little bit more icing and I'm going to fill in where that cake meets. Now, if your icing is not thick enough, you're going to have an issue, and many of you have probably encountered it if you use canned icing from a grocery store. It just falls out from between these layers. It's because it's not thick enough. It's not really designed for decorating a cake like this. It's designed for just putting frosting on a cake and you cutting it and eating it. And we're going to do the same thing down here where these little cracks are. Some people call this a crumb coat, what I'm doing. And it's just to basically glue all the little pieces of crumb to the cake. So now if you've watched any of my other programs, we're going to start at the bottom. And we're just going to do the bottom layer, a little thickness. Work our way around the cake. And although this is a caramel cake and caramel buttercream frosting, I did do it pink because I want to decorate this cake to look pretty. So it's a little deceiving, I realize it. Because people are going to bite into this thinking they're probably going to taste strawberry or something. And they'll be very surprised. Okay, so there's the bottom one. And remember, now we go to that middle layer and we do the same thing. We're going to smooth it so it's not going to make much of a difference here in a minute. Now this buttercream is my original recipe, which calls for vegetable shortening, but I also put butter in this. So it's probably about a cup of vegetable shortening and probably a half a cup of Tillamook butter. You can use any butter you desire, but my favorite butter is Tillamook. It's worth spending a little bit more, and it is delicious. So, yeah, use whatever you feel is appropriate, but Tillamook has never let me down. Cake again, you make your cake with Pillsbury cake flour. You can't go wrong with it, and it goes a long way, and you can do any flavor with the cake flours that you get. So just remember, whatever recipe you follow on the back of the box, if you're using the cake flour, you need to get online and do a little research, because sometimes it may seem, well, just add 3 tablespoons of this, but it could change the whole consistency of the cake. So you want to make sure that you really do your research. So this is a rectangular cake spatula for frosting. The advantage of using this is it can set perfectly straight, and it's what keeps the cake even. And once you have it in place, remember, you're just turning your hand with this turntable and letting it do all the work. Now I'm just going to knock that off there on the top of this cake. And I'm going to spread icing, frosting, whatever you want to call it. I call it icing. But you know, it's strange throughout the US in different areas. So I grew up in Middleburg, Florida. And in Florida, we always called it frosting. Up here in the Midwest, they call it icing. I don't care what you call it, it's good. So remember, I'm just spreading it to the edge, and then we're gonna take that cake spatula again, and we're gonna increase some height in a couple areas, and then I'll even it out. If you're wondering what that jingling sound is, that's my husband and I have 3 miniature schnauzers, and they get very rambunctious, typically when I'm recording. If I'm not recording, they seem to be quiet as a mouse. So people ask me all the time, when did you start decorating cakes? I've shared in a previous episode like my first cake I ever made, but when I was in high school, I started entering in the county fair against the adults on cake decorating. And I won a couple years in a row grand champion at the fair on my cake decorating. And it certainly did not go over well with some of the older ladies that were there because they thought that boys shouldn't be decorating cakes. But I've always been a bird of a different feather. And I've never done what people have expected of me. I am a person that goes to my own drum. So as you can see, I'm angling this in now, and it's really making a smooth side to the cake. And then up here, what you can do is just bring it in. And now I'm gonna take this little spatula I messed up over here at the side. It's unfortunate, sometimes it happens, so easy enough to fix it. I'm gonna level it back out. Then I'm gonna take this, go around the top, angle it in a little bit. And if you paid attention, I am just letting the cake table do the work. And then we're gonna take the spatula, and I'm going to just, with a wet edge, turn those little pieces that are sticking up there in. Now remember, always keep a damp cloth. I just use regular paper towels, and that way I can throw them out to clean your cake round, because it will be dirty after you've iced this cake, or it will be soiled. And then just turn the cake, clean this, and then I'll dry it. So now I'm gonna go back over it with a dry towel. And after you've dried it, kind of buff it out, because the vegetable shortening will often kind of dull it. And you can remove that by just buffing it slightly. All right, so we're gonna call this the iced end product. This is called a cake stencil. And you can put it around a cake, and then you put an icing of an alternate color or complementary color over top of it, and you'll pull it off and you have a beautiful design. So we're going to do that right now, and I'm going to show you how easy it is. So the first thing is you want to secure it on your cake, and you do that with large pins. So these stencils you can purchase online. Amazon sells assortments of them. You can go to any of your hobby stores and find stencils, and you can order them from cake decorating supply shops. So I have put 2 holes in here already, and I'm gonna go ahead and put a pin in each one. And then I'm gonna do the same thing down here at the other end, 1 inch in. Okay. So we're gonna set this on the cake. I'm gonna twist it around, and then I'm just gonna poke that into the cake. And I'll do the same thing over here. And you can see it's in place. I've mixed this icing, and what I'm gonna do is just take a little bit on the spatula, and I'll start here at this end, and I'm just gonna ice over top of this. Now you can use a little bit more because you'll be able to pull it off this stencil. So you can see what I'm doing is as if I'm icing the cake and I'm just carrying it around. Now after you've done that, make sure you're even. You can wet your spatula a little and then just go back over where you were at. Just one more time to make sure it's in the cake. So now that I've done that, what I'll do is take this straight pin out and then just pull there you go. You have a beautiful design on this cake. Now I'm going to do this on the back as well, but I can't do it until I have now cleaned this. So I'll be back in a minute. All right, so I have washed this, and now I'm going to do the same thing we just did. And your first time working with a stencil, it's going to be difficult, so give yourself a break. Or you may just absolutely master it, and the first time you pull that stencil off, it's going to look fantastic, and you'll be doing stencils on cakes from here on out. I think this tangerine color on this soft pink really is pretty. It's not a color scheme most people would probably choose, but then again, I'm a bird of a different feather. So you don't really have the luxury of seeing how beautiful this design is, but it really is a lacing over this cake. Okay, so I have taken the disposable bag, I put a tip in it, and then as you've seen in some of my previous shows, I cup it over my hand, and then just hold this in your arm, and just start putting the icing in the bag. Now I hope I'm gonna have enough icing. I'm pretty sure I will, but I'm gonna be cutting it close. So after you have it that way, remember what I've said before, work that icing down. You can use the edge of the counter to do it. Once you've got to that point, twist. Your icing's at the end. And we're going to do a quick shell border. Now, really the pressure is what determines your shell. So a lot of pressure when you start, and then you let off of it and it'll make it narrow. So as you can see, these shells start large and then they come narrow. And we're going to do the base the same way. Now, if I had better cameras in here, you could see what I'm doing over here, but as I turn it around, you'll see basically what it should look like. And I apologize, but maybe someday I'll have someone who wants to sponsor me, and it'll look a little bit better. So come on, Tillamook, come on, Pillsbury.
Kroger.
Come on, Kroger. So now that I have the border done on the cake, the lacing with the stencil, I want something on the very top, and I think that's just simply gonna be sprinkles, just different assorted dragées and sprinkles that I put on the top of it, just to finish it off. So here's the end product. I'll take a finished picture when I put the dragées in the center of those flowers, but I want you to see how gorgeous that is and how beautiful that design on the sides of the cake. Again, as I've shared before, it doesn't take a lot to do something that's homemade and looks beautiful and tastes delicious. This cake means a lot to me because it's going to my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law accepts me and my husband unconditionally and always sends us love. So this is my way of giving back to her and what she does for our community because she's a teacher. She always gives herself. So I hope she enjoys this. And always remember, love is love, celebrate and embrace diversity. Until next time, And remember, if you like what you see, hit that like button. If you have suggestions, send them my way. I'm happy to try to take some of them on. And great baking. Enjoy. So here is the end product. And I hope you can see how beautiful it is. And the beautiful stenciling on the side. Each one of those I filled with a edible sugar drugget.